single missed salary negotiation at the start of your job can cost you more than £1 million over the course of your career. Let that sink in. 1 million because every future raise, every future bonus, every pension contribution is calculated as a percentage of your base salary. And if the base is too low, everything built on top of it is lower still. Most people do not negotiate, not because they don't want more, but because they do not know what to say. And for non-native English speakers, that problem is double, because even if you know what you want, finding the right words, in the right tone, in a second language, in a high-stakes conversation, is one of the hardest things to do in professional English. Today, I want to give you the language to do it. Not just salary, contracts, deadlines, the full range of professional negotiations that you will face. I want to start with the single most important concept in negotiation psychology, one that most people have never heard of, but will change everything once you understand it. I'm Mike Fox, professional English coach, qualified careers counsellor, psychology graduate, with over 6,000 hours of working one-to-one with clients. Today, we're talking about negotiations, so let's get on with it. The concept that I want to introduce first is BATNA, B-A-T-N-A, Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. It was developed by Roger Fisher and William Ury at the Harvard Negotiations Project, the most respected negotiation research project in the world, and it is the foundation of almost everything else we know about how negotiations really work. Your BATNA is simply this: what is your best option if the negotiations fail? If you're negotiating a salary and the employer will not move, what will you do? Do you have another offer? Can you stay where you are? Are you willing to walk away? Research by Alan Galinsky and Joe McGee found that a strong BATNA is the single biggest predictor of negotiation success. Not your communication skills, not your experience, not how confident you sound. It is your BATNA. That's the biggest predictor. Because when you know you can walk away, and you genuinely can, you negotiate from strength rather than desperation. And strength, even when it's unspoken, changes the entire dynamic of the conversation. Here's the practical implication. Before any important negotiation, spend time genuinely strengthening your alternatives. Apply to other roles. Research the market. Know what comparable positions pay. Get other quotes. Extend other conversations. You may never need to use your BATNA, but knowing it exists changes how you show up to the negotiation. Now, the second concept is the anchoring effect. Research from the Harvard Business School and Columbia University has established something that's almost uncomfortable to know. The first number mentioned in a negotiation has a disproportionate influence on the final outcome, and it's called the anchoring effect. If an employer opens salary negotiations at £40,000, even if you know the role is worth £55,000, that first number pulls the entire conversation towards it. You find yourself negotiating up from £40,000 rather than down from £55,000. The research recommendation is clear. Where possible, anchor first. Name your number before they name theirs, not randomly, based on research, based on market data, based on what the role is genuinely worth. For example, based on my research into comparable roles and what I bring to this position, I'm looking for a salary in the region of £55,000 to £60,000. You have set the anchor. The conversation happens within that range, not theirs. And notice one more thing about the phrase. It anchors to a range rather than a single number. Research on precision in negotiations has found that a specific, precise number, 57,500 rather than 50,000, signals that you have done careful research and know your value. But a range gives flexibility and signals willingness to engage. Both are useful at different moments. Let's walk through a salary negotiation from beginning to end, with the exact phrases for each moment. Before the conversation begins, research is not optional, it's a foundation. Before any salary negotiation, know the numbers. And it's important to know 3 numbers. Your target, what you genuinely want based on research. Your floor, the minimum that you would be prepared to accept. And your BATNA, what will you say if they say no? Without these 3 numbers, really, you're guessing. And guessing in a high-stakes conversation, in a second language, under pressure, it's a very difficult position to be in. When they ask, what salary are you looking for? This moment makes most people uncomfortable, especially non-native speakers who often interpret the question as a test that they might get wrong. It is not a test, it is the opening of a negotiation. Treat it like one. Based on my research into comparable roles and taking into account my experience, I'm looking for something in the region of, is that within the range that you had in mind for this role? Notice the question at the end. You are inviting a response. You're making it a conversation, not a demand. When their offer is lower than you expected, this is the moment where most people will accept immediately or overcorrect and become aggressive. Both are mistakes. The research is clear. A pause before responding is one of the most powerful tools in negotiation. Not a theatrical pause, just take a breath. Let the number sit for a moment, then. Thank you for your offer. I'm genuinely excited about this opportunity. That said, based on my research and what I bring to this role, I was expecting something closer to your target. Is there flexibility on the base salary? 3 elements here: gratitude, specific references to your research and your value, and a direct but collaborative question. When they say the salary is fixed, do not accept that at face value. In many organisations, the base salary is constrained, but the package is not. I understand the base salary may be fixed. Could we explore other elements of the package? A sign-in bonus, an earlier performance review, additional holiday allowance, or flexible working? This is where careers coaching can really come into its own. The total compensation conversation is frequently more flexible than the salary conversation. The person you are negotiating with often has more authority over the package than the number when you need time to think. Thank you. I'd like to take a day to consider the full offer before I offer my response. Would that be okay? This phrase is almost always acceptable, and it takes the pressure off a decision that deserves clear-headed thought rather than an on-the-spot reaction. Confirming what has been agreed. Whatever was agreed, salary, start date, benefits, title, review timeline. Confirm it in writing before you consider it settled. Thank you for the conversation. I'll follow up with a brief email confirming what we've agreed. I just want to make sure that we're both working from the same understanding. Research shows that verbal agreements are often misremembered. The candidate is almost always the less powerful party. When discrepancies arise, write it down or get it in writing. Negotiating contracts and terms requires a slightly different approach from salary negotiation. Because the conversation is less personal, you are negotiating terms, not your own value. But the stakes can be just as high. The key principle from the Harvard Negotiation Project is this: focus on interest, not position. A position is what you want. I need the deadline extended by 2 weeks. An interest is why you want it. The current deadline does not allow sufficient time for quality review, which could expose both parties to risk. When you argue from positions, negotiation becomes adversarial. It's a fight. When you explain your underlying interest and invite the other party to share theirs, it becomes collaborative problem solving, a conversation. And collaborative problem solving in English is a different conversation from a confrontation. Phrases for contract negotiation. Opening the discussion about terms. I'd like to discuss a few points in the contract before we move forward. There are 1 or 2 areas that I would like to understand better. Raising a concern without making a demand. This clause around the specific term. Could you help me understand the thinking behind it? I want to make sure that we both understand what we're committing to. Proposing a change. I'd suggest amending this to offer an alternative. I think that works better for both parties because, give you a reason. Reach an agreement on a term. I'm happy with that. Shall we note that we've agreed and move on? Protecting yourself when the agreement is partial. We've agreed on most of this. Could we flag the outstanding points and agree a timeline for resolving them before we sign? 1 phrase worth memorizing for any conversation. I'm not in a position to agree with that as it stands, and I am open to finding something that works for both of us. That sentence does something remarkable. It says no, clearly, without ambiguity, and it immediately signals that you're not walking away from the table. You are a collaborative negotiator, not a confrontational one. In cross-cultural negotiation research, this balance, clear firmness, combined with genuine openness to dialogue, is consistently identified as the most effective posture for non-native English speakers. It avoids the trap of being too passive and the trap of sounding aggressive. Deadline negotiation is the most common form of negotiation the professional will face, and the one they prepare the least for, because it does not feel like a negotiation. It feels like an awkward conversation where you are asking for something you should not need. But here is the reframe that I want you to take away. A professional who can negotiate a deadline effectively, explaining why the timeline is not realistic, proposing an alternative, and secure an agreement without damaging the relationship, is a more valuable professional than the one who silently accepts unrealistic deadlines and then misses them. The miss is the problem, not the negotiation. When the deadline is set and you know it's unrealistic, I want to make sure that I can deliver to the standard it deserves. Given the current workload, the original deadline is going to be very tight. Could we look at and then give a specific date? When your manager sets a deadline without consulting you, before we confirm that timeline, could I just flag a few things that might affect it? I want to make sure that we're setting realistic expectations. When a client pushes for a faster turnaround, I understand the urgency and I want to deliver something that you'll be genuinely happy with. To do that well, I need until specific date. Would that work for you? When you need to push back on scope creep that's affecting the deadline. The original timeline was based on the scope that we agreed. Since then, several additional requirements have come in. To accommodate those and still deliver on time, we need to either extend the deadline or reduce scope elsewhere. Which would you prefer? The last phrase is particularly powerful. It gives the other person a genuine choice, and it makes the connection between timeline and scope explicit, which is something that clients and managers genuinely don't consider. The most important thing about deadline negotiation, raise it early. The moment you see the deadline is at risk, the moment it becomes visible, that is when you have the conversation. Not the day before, and certainly not the day after. Early flagging is not a weakness, it is professionalism. It gives both parties time to find a solution, and it is the difference between being seen as someone who manages their work and someone who misses their deadlines and fails to deliver. I want to spend a few minutes on something that sits underneath all of the phrases that we've discussed today. The balance between hedging and firmness. Research on business English negotiation consistently identifies this as the key language challenge for non-native speakers and the main source of misunderstanding in cross-cultural negotiation. Too much hedging and you sound uncertain, easy to push around, unclear about what you actually want. Too much directness, and in English professional culture particularly, you can come across as aggressive, inflexible and rude. The sweet spot is what researchers called softened firmness. Clear position, diplomatic delivery. And here's what it looks like. An example of pure hedging. That's weak. I was maybe thinking that perhaps we could possibly consider a slightly higher figure. An example of obnoxious directness, the wrong tone. That's not enough. I want £60,000. Softened firmness. I appreciate the offer. I was expecting something closer to £60,000 based on my research. Is there flexibility there? All three sentences say the same thing. The first is too weak to be taken seriously, and to be honest, I'm not sure what they're asking or what they're saying. The second is too blunt for most professionals in English, or most professional English contexts. The third is clear, grounded, collaborative. Negotiation English also relies heavily on conditional structures. If and then. If you're able to move on the salary, I'd be happy to confirm today. Notice I don't need to say then. If we extend the deadline by 1 week, I can guarantee the quality that you're looking for. If that particular clause is non-negotiable, I need to see some movement elsewhere in the contract. Conditionals are powerful because they make the trade explicit. They show that you are thinking about both parties' interests, and they give the other party a clear path to yes. Let me bring everything together. Before any negotiation, know your BATNA. Know your target, know your floor. Research changes everything. Do your research. On salary, anchor with your range before they anchor with theirs. Use gratitude plus specificity plus a collaborative question and get everything agreed in writing. On contracts, focus on interests, not positions. Use I'm not in a position to agree to it as it stands, but I'm open to something that works for both of us. On deadlines, raise concerns early. Give options, make the connection between scope and timeline specific. And throughout, you soften firmness. Clear position, diplomatic delivery. Conditional structures make the trade visible. Here's the thing I most want you to take away from today. Most non-native English speakers leave the negotiating table with less than they deserve, not because their English is too weak, but because they were never taught that negotiation is a skill with learnable language. It is. The phrases exist, the frameworks exist, and now you have them. In my next video in this series, I'm going to look at one of the most requested topics I hear from my clients: how to handle difficult conversations in English. When you need to address a conflict, push back on your manager, or have a conversation that you've been avoiding for weeks. Subscribe so you don't miss. And please leave a comment or at least like the video if you like it. And if you're facing a salary negotiation right now, a salary conversation, a contract discussion, I offer a free 30-minute discovery call. No obligation, just an honest conversation. We can work through the specific conversation that you need to have with specific language to handle it. The link is in the description. I'm Mike Fox. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.